Hallo allemaal, welkom. Hello everybody, welcome to this online lecture about the scholarly process session in view of the ICO Introduction course for the spring 2020 that we give online due to the specific corona measures. Hope you all enjoy the introduction course, and I hope you will also enjoy this short lecture about the scholarly process. The scholarly process, what is the scholarly process? And when asked to give a lecture about the scholarly project, about the scholarly process to PhD students, well, what should I talk about? This was a question I asked myself in preparing this lecture, this video lecture, and I was lucky that I could build on the work and the shoulders of persons that have given this talk before me and that were so willing to share their preparations with me. So I would like to start this course with a big shout out and thank you to these people you see here. And I don't do this only because I would like to thank them, of course. That's the main thing, but also because this is an illustration about one important step, according to me, in the scholarly process. And that is, if you want to do scientific work, you need to stand on the shoulders of giants. Those of you that have been using Google Scholar will have seen the baseline of Google Scholar, and that is stand on the shoulder of giants. And that's exactly what you need to do, an important step, a very important step in the scholarly process. It starts obviously with a brilliant idea for new research. And then something less brilliant is to start looking or hunting for money in order to realize this idea. All of you, I hope, are in the position that they have a brilliant idea and are in the position to carry out the scientific work without the need to think too much about where to find money. So you can start the scholarly process by digging into the literature in order to build on the work of the giants in your field, so that you can make sure that you contribute to the state of the art in the field and make a next small or big step in that field. We will go through that process. Not into too much detail, because that's not the aim of this talk. The aim is to give you some insight in what it means in the scholarly process. And one of the things you can do is to Google scholarly process or scholarship or scholarly method. And then you find, for instance, this definition. It is the body of principles and practices used by scholars to make their claims about the subject as valid and trustworthy as possible, and to make them known to the scholarly public. So I will unravel now these three lines that are part of this definition given by Wikipedia and go through them, because I think I will be able to tell you the most essential things about the scholarly process by means of doing this. All right. The body of principles and practices used by scholars. That's where the scholarly process start. That's where I was referring to when I was talking about standing on the shoulders of giants. And this is where we can find it. The body of principles and practices can be consulted in libraries nowadays. Also, luckily, especially in these times, online. So what do you need to do? You need to start with consulting this body of principles and practices used by scholars, and make sure that you know this body of principles and practices used, so that you can make use of it and build on it. I'm gonna move my video a bit. So this body of principles and practices, or body of knowledge, has multiple phases. There is the body of knowledge in your own specific niche that you definitely need to know, but you need to go a bit further. You need to situate your niche within the wider body of knowledge in your own academic field for sure, but preferably also in the body of knowledge of other related academic fields, or even non-academic knowledge if you want to start writing and communicating about it. So you need to stand on the shoulder of giants, especially those giants in your own specific field, but preferably you need to look a bit further so that you can build on the knowledge that is there in related field, or at least in the broad academic field. Second, you need the scholarly process. I can't go back in this online presentation, but that's not a bad thing. First, I move my video. All right. Second line was to make their claims about the subject as valid and trustworthy as possible. This means that you need to allow your claims to be checked by linking up, for instance, with other excellent research groups and research. This is a very good thing to do. Don't stay isolated in your room, but make use of excellent researchers and groups. And when this virus is over, it's a very good idea to travel again and to visit researchers, to talk about these researchers with your ideas, to learn from other researchers, but also to ask them to check your claims, to give feedback to you and to help you improve your research, to sharpen your ideas. What you can learn also there is to broaden your palette of research methods, designs, and analysis techniques, which might be necessary in order for you to choose the best research method, design, or analysis technique to answer your specific research questions. You can do this by going to conferences, by attending courses like the ICO course, but also by visiting other researchers and scholars in your own country, but also abroad. This is something I would warmly recommend. In order to make claims that are valid and trustworthy, or as trustworthy as possible, it's important to refrain from breaking societal trust. Especially in these days, it's clear again that society trusts and builds on the expertise of experts. And these experts don't break ethical rules, for instance. Therefore, it's important to follow ethical regulations as a scientist. And this is part of the ethical part of doing research, to take care of data management and be transparent about how you collect your data, where your data is accessible in order for other researchers, for instance, to do replication research or to elaborate on your research. The aim, of course, is not to do just research because it's fun. That's also an important aspect, of course, but the aim is actually to advance the field and not only your career or the career of the specific researcher. So the aim is to contribute to research by supporting for instance, other researchers, and this can be other PhD students, even your professors, but also students in bachelor, masters, and research masters program. Helping these students can be an important aspect of being a researcher and contributing to the scholarly process. Therefore, it could be also interesting to combine academic scholarship with teaching to enrich curricula with new scientific findings so that new people can learn from the knowledge that you have been built so far. And also to contribute to practice by unlocking knowledge to the field and by providing effective solutions if possible. So, although the definition only talked about communicating to other scholars, I would strongly recommend to widen this definition and to communicate to a wider audience, or at least to try to contribute not only to your specific niche, but to your to science in the broad definition of the word, and also to all those that can make use of your scientific actions. All right. I know that for PhD students in particular, but actually not only for PhD students, for all scientists these days, an important part of the scholarly process. After having done your research in a rigorous way, having thought about which methods would be the most appropriate methods, clearly designed your research, collected data, analyzed data in the most appropriate way, the step to publishing the research is an important step. And it's especially important when you're a young researcher, because you want other people to learn about the work that you are doing. So therefore, I will spend some more attention to the idea of how to publish your work. And I think the most important question here is to answering this question: why do you write? And here's my answer. You don't write because you want to say something. You write because you have something to say. So make sure you have something to say. Think very clearly about what is it I have to say? What is it I want other people to read in my work? And make sure that you can build a story on this message. You write because you want that other scientists and if you extend it, other people read your paper and build on your work. This is the idea why you write. Of course, you also write because you want to finish your PhD, but in the end, the PhD is also a ticket to the labor market and a ticket to do more scientific research. And the work in your PhD, you do this because ultimately you want to contribute to science, and you want other scientists also to know what you have done so that they can build on your work. So how can you do that? How to publish, for instance, your first PhD research paper? Here are some tips that we gathered for you. We started 5 tips. The first tip is read. You have to read a lot because you want to build on the right shoulders, and you want to situate your own research within the wide area of research and within the specific field you want to contribute to. So you have to write after having read a lot, and then you need to revise again, and revise again in order to make your paper better, better, and better. So you can revise your paper based on feedback. Of course, you can ask feedback from your supervisors, and that's definitely a thing to do, but my advice would be not to limit yourself to the feedback you get from your supervisor, but also involve others in your review process, your fellow PhD students, but also people you might meet at conferences. Setting goals and intermediate deadlines could be a good idea in helping you in this process of revising and revising. I will talk soon about how to select the right journal, because my advice would be to think about a journal maybe even before you start writing, so that you know for which journal and for which community you're writing, but also to think about where will I aim to present my work, and for instance to use conference presentations to get feedback from people that are interested in your work already. You can also try to get involved in symposia if you succeed in finding other people that are working on related topics. It's very interesting to try to set up a symposium, for instance, for a JUR conference, or try to get involved in special issues, apply to a call that is launched if a specific field is working on a specific special issue. Don't hesitate. It's not because you're a PhD student that people will not be interested in your work, especially if you do your work in a very rigorous way. And that's exactly what we think that you will be doing. So how to choose a journal? Well, I would say my basic rule applies again. You write because you want that people read and act upon your work. So you will be looking for the journal that represents the community for whom you work. And one thing that can help you to find that right community is to look at which journals you are citing yourself when you're writing. Probably the journals you are citing a lot represent the community that will be interested also in your own paper. Also, if you are going to conferences related to your field, you can talk about these people in relation to the question what journals they read and what journals they publish in. So find a community that will be interested in your work, because then you will have a community that will probably read your work. The second bullet point is related to this issue, to what scholarly discussion, in which journal does your study contribute? Think about, where do I want to contribute to? So find that community and find a connection to that discussion that's going on, to which you want to make a contribution. I think this is the most important thing to think about first. And then second, you can think about other criteria that might be important for you, like impact factors. Journals are ranked based on how many citations the articles in the journals get on average. You can consult this in the Web of Science. It's a list that's published every year and also varies every year a bit, but there is obviously some stability also. So there are journals that get more citations, which means probably that they are also read more by other scientists that write papers and refer to other papers in that journal, which is actually what you want, because we want to contribute to a community. We want our papers to be read, and we want other people to build on this. So for this, the impact factor might be an indicator, but this is unfortunately not true for every field, because some fields and subfields also in the domain of education are over or underrepresented. Anyway, it might be a good way to get an idea about which journals are often cited, and if one of these journals is representing the community you want to write for, this might be a good criteria. Another criteria might be whether the journal is open access or not. Open access means that your paper can be consulted freely online, and that you also remain the owner of your work, that you retain the copyright. For many other journals, this is not true. They will end up behind a paywall, and the copyrights moves to the publisher. If you do not want this, or if you want your paper to be widely accessible, it might be a good thing to think about journals, or to check for journals that allow to publish open access. There are different ways to publish open access. Some of them are very expensive for the authors, some of them are not at all. So it's relevant to explore this area. And there might be other criteria. But like I said before, I think it's wise to think already in the very early stages of writing about for which journal or journals am I writing this paper, because behind these journals there are communities, and you're writing for these communities. Okay, when you have written your paper, you need to submit your paper to a journal, and behind the journal is an editorial team and our reviewers. The specific thing about the scholarly process is that you do not only do your work in a very rigorous way, you also let other people check this and comment on this. You do this during the process, but before a paper can get published, others will do this also for you, and these are others that you do not select usually. So you send your paper to a journal, and then an editor will have a look at it, and you need to help this editor a bit. So you usually can add a cover letter. And in this letter, you can say why your paper is of interest for the readers of the journal, what the added value of your paper is, and why your paper is innovative for this specific community. So it's wise to spend some attention to this, because editors need to choose whether they will send your paper to other reviewers, or whether they will save the time of these reviewers and reject your paper immediately. This might something that you do not realize, but the majority of papers is rejected in this way and is not published. So help the editor making the right decision, and the right decision for you is that the editor sends your paper to reviewer. So help these editors to make already explicit why your paper fits the purpose of the journal you're submitting. Like I said, most papers are rejected immediately. And usually this is because people don't spend attention to these basic rules I just explained to you. So if you find a journal that's a match with your research, and you help the editor in making clear why this is the case, I would say you have a big chance of moving to the next step, which is going to reviewers. But then also you need to realize that I would say less than 1% of the papers will be accepted as is. Most of the papers there will also be rejected again, but after reviewers have given arguments for this. And if you're lucky, you get a major revision. If you're very lucky, you get a minor revision. So my advice would be, don't be disappointed too much when you receive a letter that your work is interesting but needs major revisions, and then a list of several pages with what needs to be changed. This is a reason to be happy, because this means that both the editor and the reviewer see value in your paper and give you feedback in order to make your paper better, so that it will be more relevant for a more wider readership. So what you need to do is, and I move myself again a bit, read the review carefully. Look at the main message of the editor. Usually the editor gives some clues about what she or he wants you to spend attention to. Look at the main message of reviewers. It's very rarely the case that the reviewers agree, so they might have conflicting suggestions. And usually the editor offers you a solution to deal with this, but sometimes she or he doesn't. So then you need to think about how you can solve the major issues, and need to give arguments when you revise and resubmit your article. So what you need to do this is look carefully through the list, make yourself some decisions about how you can deal with the comments. And what I usually do myself, and also with my own PhD students, is list these messages or suggestions by the reviewers in a table. And in the second column of the table, we write suggestions ourselves about how we could deal with these comments. And this is also what we submit when we revise and we submit our paper to the editor, so that the editor can clearly see these were the comments and this is how the authors have dealt with it. You can decide not to deal with all comments, but that would not be my recommendation. I would suggest to deal with all comments, even if your changes are only very small. And I will explain why this is my recommendation. First of all, also take into account when you reply to editors and to reviewers that editors and reviewers are human beings. They spend time in reading your paper, they spend time in giving their comments. And even if you think the reviewer is wrong, my basic rule is he or she is not wrong. He or she is always right, and you need to improve it. So I have been editor myself for many years, and a reviewer myself. A reaction like this reviewer has not read my paper carefully enough. he or she is wrong and I will not change it, and this is the reason why he or she is wrong, is not acceptable, because simply this reviewer has spent some attention, maybe only on the train, but this is what most readers will also do. So she or he has spent attention to reading your work, and she or he might indeed have read it in a wrong way, but this means that also many other readers will potentially read it in a wrong way. So it is your task as an author to make sure that your work cannot be read in a wrong way. So you need to improve your work in order to make sure that other readers, other reviewers will not be able to read it in a wrong way. And that's why I would say always take reviewer comments into account, even if they are a result of a misinterpretation of your work. Rephrase your work a little bit in order to make sure that misinterpretations are avoided. Be also prepared to cut text. It's not nice if you spend many days, hours, months on writing and you need to reduce your work with several pages, but be prepared to do this, and be sure that after a period of time you will realize that this was probably the right thing to do. When you respond to the editor, it's good advice to restate the comments. That's why I think working with the table is interesting, because then the editor sees the comments and sees also how you have dealt with it. It's not an ethical way of behavior to submit the same version to another journal. People have spent time, try to look at the comments, try to revise, even only small parts before you submit it to another journal after a rejection. There is a chance that the same reviewers will read your work, and it's not nice if you see that you spend time on reading and commenting other people's work and that they just ignore it. What you have to do is make the editor's job easy, because after you resubmit it, you have to convince in the first place the editor that the work has taken the comments of the reviewers into account, and that there's no need to send it back to the reviewers, but that the editor can be sure that she or he does the right job in pressing the accept button. So make the work of the editor easy, make it very explicit why you have dealt with the comments of the reviewers, and that it's not necessary to send it to the reviewers again. In many cases, the editor will decide to send it back to the reviewers and ask them to check again whether their comments have been taken into account well enough. So when you finally get the editor's decision that your work, and after many revisions, will be accepted for publication, I think the right thing to do is to celebrate this with your colleagues, for instance with cake, but even small successes can be celebrated. If for a highly ranked journal, or even for another journal, for any journal, you get an opportunity to work on major revisions, I think this is also a reason to celebrate it. If you get accepted for a conference, this is probably a reason for a small celebration. If you wait for the final acceptance of your PhD, it will take you at least 4 years before you can celebrate. And I think we can make our own lives as scientists and other colleagues much more joyful if we all start sharing our, not only our bad lucks, but also our good luck. So celebrate your small successes with cakes and with your colleagues. So this was it. I wish you all good luck, and I hope that in the interactive sessions that we will have in the ICO Introduction course, we'll get a chance to know each other's work a little bit better, and I'll also be there for you, also online, to answer your questions, also in relation to the talk I have given right now. So, hope to see you soon.